Hello and welcome back to Thoughts Per Episode, House of a Dragon edition. House of a Dragon is back and I could not be happier. I adored season 1 of this show and that was all the way back in 2022 now. We didn't get anything last year, so I am so happy that we've got more. Today's episode is called A Son for a Son and it's all about the fallout from the end of last season when Aemond accidentally or not caused the death of Jaehaerys? No, I'm already getting mixed up with all of the names. Lucerys, commonly referred to as Luke, I believe, Rhaenyra's second son. I did go back and watch Alt-Shift-X's breakdown of episode 10, which I had never actually done, and I also went back and listened to a little bit of my own thoughts on episode 10, so I kind of got back into the swing of things by doing that, but I actually found it surprisingly easy to pick up the cast of characters and the setting of this world going back into this. I was worried I wouldn't remember any of the events, or I wouldn't remember people's names, or I would forget that certain characters existed, but honestly, it's like no time at all has passed. I think they have recast Rhaenyra's oldest son, which threw me for a loop for a second. But he's aging up, it makes sense. Either that or he just looks different. Anyway, we open with a new intro. We are no longer following literal blood showing us the bloodlines of everyone. Now we're weaving a tapestry of the Dance of Dragons. And I was surprised by that. I don't know if they're going to change it up every season, or if it just feels more appropriate now that we're talking less about bloodlines and how everyone's related and talking more about this kind of like historical story that is unfolding. I don't know. I appreciated that we saw Winterfell again and we saw the Wall, we saw the North, and I was surprised actually that the Lord of the North was talking about, he's clearly he's talking about how he sent 1/10 of his men to the Wall as an honor, not like a punishment, and he's very concerned about winter is coming, obviously, but also protecting the realms of the living from the dead. And obviously this show has played up some of the aspects of like they've created this prophecy from Aegon the Conqueror about the fact that he came over here to protect the world of the living from the army of the dead in this forthcoming conflict and everything that wasn't in the original text. And I feel like this is almost another element of trying to weave this prequel series into the main Game of Thrones series by being like, yeah, and obviously this Lord of the North is very concerned about the army of the dead, and obviously he's one of the only ones who believes in them. But I remember at the start of Game of Thrones, even the Northmen were kind of like, yeah, okay, sure, Grumpkins and Snarks. So I guess maybe you could argue that this Northern Lord, I should look up his goddamn name, but he's you could argue that he's like superstitious. And it's not normal for maybe the Lord of Winterfell to be this invested in the Wall and protecting the realms of men, etc., etc. But I think this is another like, oh hey, this is still a thing that's going to happen in this world's future. You've seen it happen. I'm not annoyed by it or anything. I was just surprised. But I guess it does make sense as a reason for why the North might not want to send a bunch of men down into this southern war. I think, you know what, small theory time, it could also be fun if the Lord of Winterfell is just playing this up and actually he doesn't give a shit, but he's just trying to not have to involve himself in a southern war. So he's like, it's the Wall, all those damn Walking Dead out there, gotta protect them. Sorry, I can't fight in the Dance of Dragons. Not that it's called that yet. He didn't come off that way to me, but that would be funny. Now, another thing I noticed in the next scene I think it's the next scene anyway, when Velaryon, Lord Corlin Velaryon is looking to get his ships ready to go and defend the Gullet, which is the stretch of sea between Westeros and Essos, from any potential incursions from Essos that might be hired from like Aegon Targaryen and that kind of thing, and he's going to like inspect his ships and stuff. Do you know who we see? A man named Alan de Hull, played by Abu Bakr Salim. I hope I'm pronouncing his name correctly. I've never heard him say it himself, but if you don't know who that is the voice actor of one Bayek from Assassin's Creed Origins, and I love that man. He is fantastic. He's put out a game called Tales of Khazar-Azal, and some of the stuff he talks about with that game is really moving as well. So I was so happy to see him here. I think he's a magnificent actor. I hope he gets more scenes outside of just that like one appearance. I wouldn't be surprised if people who have never heard of him or seen him before were just like, I have no idea who that guy is, but I like him. Similar to like Davos Seaworth when he first showed up in season 2. Is he this? Is he this show's Davos Seaworth? I would be down for that. Now, I liked the scene of when Vhagar was approaching King's Landing, and you saw all the men on the walls just struck with absolute fear because suddenly this dragon, which they were already worried about, I'm sure, but they've never been on the wrong side of a dragon. Now suddenly they are. And with the news of Lucerys' death, they're almost anticipating an attack from Rhaenyra and her blacks. And in fact, that almost happens because Daemon Targaryen tries to get Rhaenys to go and attack King's Landing with him. He says, I can't take on Vhagar alone. So he needs her, and she just refuses, which, absolutely. You tell him, Rhaenys. You tell him. But yeah, I love the fact that Vhagar is approaching, and they can't quite tell which dragon it is yet, and they're just struck with fear. They've been making these giant harpoons to try and deter dragons, which I find so fascinating. It's like a symbol of self-defeat from the Targaryens. Like, this civil war is going to undo so much of their power. And, like, the fact that I don't know if they had to invent this weapon, but the fact that they mounted it on King's Landing walls, that also detracts from their own power. Because now they've kind of, like, invested in these anti-dragon killing weapons, thereby making dragons more killable, at least in King's Landing. And that's so, like... Yeah, that's so like a descent from the power of Aegon the Conqueror, you know? Next up, we see Kristen Cole going downtown, having a bit of a taste of royalty once again. And I can't remember if him and Alicent were having an affair last season. I think there might have been something regarding that. Either that or there were like looks passing between them or something. But what I find so fascinating about this is it almost feels rote. This affair that they're having. It's not enticing, it's not spicy, there's no passion there. It's just like one minute you see them doing the deed, and the next you see them talking about politics, and Alison's like, we can't do this again. But like the delivery of that line, even that is almost rote. It's like a performance between the two of them. I'm sure from Kristen Cole's perspective, he's trying to get back to that passion of his youth with his affair with a slightly too young Rhaenyra Targaryen. And meanwhile, I'm sure Alicent's having this affair for similar reasons of like, maybe not trying to copy Rhaenyra, maybe this is all about Alicent's life and her trying to have some kind of power and say in her own life. But yeah, it's definitely not the most passionate, attractive affair ever portrayed on film. I loved that scene with a small council, with Sir Tyland trying to get his small council ball back from such a weird sentence. Back from the prince. Is that Prince Jaehaerys, I'm assuming? I'm assuming that's the prince that got knifed at the end of this episode. And we see within Aegon a similar thing that we saw with Joffrey, the little shit, of like this young king who cares more about satisfying his whims than the actual politics of governing the country. He's not as bad as Joffrey. We do see him take a vested interest at points with the war and stuff, and we do see him listening to Otto Hightower, his hand, when he's taking when he's listening to like petitions and stuff. But he definitely has an impetuous streak to him. He's definitely a little shit. I just think we've seen worse. Like, he's not great. I wouldn't like to hang out with him, but he's no Joffrey. Like, I like how he wants a simple solution to everything. And when he's talking about going and fighting Rhaenyra and her blacks, Otto Hightower's like, the queen has dragons as well. He's like, mine are bigger. It's like such a simple answer. But yeah, as I've already said, the Greens are almost guaranteeing war by assuming Rhaenyra's response, which does, to be fair, end up being pretty much war. But still, I love this idea that like by preparing for war and everything, they're almost causing it. Rhaenyra does go and find it was pretty like blurred out and unclear. I couldn't quite tell if it was actually her son or if it was just like the wing of her son's dragon, but Rhaenyra finds evidence of her son's death. And as was previously mentioned in the episode, which I really appreciated as well, there's a difference between being told that someone you know is dead and actually like seeing and knowing for yourself, especially in this world. And I really love how, she's clearly found these sailors who, rumors that they found something of like dragon wings in the ocean or something, and they've like hauled it back, and so she's like flying towards them, and they're all screaming, dragon, dragon, and they're running away, and she just doesn't even bat an eyelid at them. She doesn't care for them. She's there for one reason and one reason only. And time and again in the show, we are shown small folk kind of like being collateral damage, like not being given the care at all, and like the fact that this is about infighting between royal houses and it's not good for anyone. Yeah, it's really well done. I like that they're playing around with titles for Aegon the Second, and they try Aegon the Magnanimous, and he's like, the Magnanimous? Nobody knows what magnanimous means. And yeah, as I already mentioned, I do really love that scene of him hearing petitions with Otto Hightower. You've got the 3 separate petitions, right? The first one you've got coming up asking for sheep, and Aegon's like, I'm going to be a good king. I'm going to be a benevolent king. And so he's going to give this man his sheep back. And Otto Hightower kind of strides up to the Iron Throne and is like, there's a reason we're taking 1/10 of everyone's sheep. We need to feed the dragons for the coming war, all this stuff. And he's like, I've reconsidered, and unfortunately we need to keep your sheep. And then the next man comes up, and before Otto Hightower has a chance to react, he's like, yes, of course, I'll do that, don't worry about it. And then the third man comes up, and he's also asking the king for leniency regarding like getting paid for making the weapons before they're done, so that they actually can eat and stuff. And Aegon's like, yeah, I can do that. And Otto Hightower starts to protest. He's like, I can do that. And so clearly we've already got this burgeoning divide between the king and his hand. The king's desire for simple solutions for everything, because he wants to be loved and he can't be bothered, I guess, to learn the finer details of things. And the hand's kind of alarm at this childish bad decision making. And clearly, he's orchestrated a lot of the way that the kingdom works, and it's now being kind of like thrown aside by this boy. And then you got leery Laris leering at the edges, watching all this unfold and realizing, oh, I can get some power for myself if I now go and tell him, oh, the people have seen you being outright influenced by the hand. You don't want to be seen as being influenced by the hand. You're not a puppet, right? That was your dad's hand. You don't need him to be hand, right? And it's like so overt, but it doesn't matter, because Aegon is more concerned with his image than he is with political machinations. We see Rhaenyra get home, and I love the scene where... I love every scene, let's be real, I don't need to keep saying that. She walks back into the council room, and everyone's waiting for her, and she gets announced, and everyone's waiting to see what she's going to do. And the only words she says is, I want Aemond Targaryen. And she doesn't say dead, and she doesn't say alive, she just wants him. And so she stalks off and leaves everyone to kind of like consider what that means and how they can do that for her. And this leads to Daemon sneaking into King's Landing and paying some assassins to go and assassinate Aemond. Except the assassin says, but what if we can't find him? And then it cuts away, and later on, as we're seeing them stalk through the palace and argue with each other, we hear that basically the arrangement they've come to is, if they can't find Aemond, any son will do. A son for a son. And that's ultimately why they invade the Queen's bedroom, and they try to follow the directions to the letter. So they could kill the Queen, but the Queen's not a son. And then they see the twins, and they're going to kill one of them, but they can't figure out which one of them is a boy. So they ask her to point out which one is the boy, and she points at one of them. And they hesitate like she's probably lying. Then they see the look in her eyes. And then I think that's when the king's treatment of his sister wife, comes into play, because clearly she's worried about her son growing up to be another Aegon. Or maybe like some part of her sees this as like, it's maybe if she has to give one of them away, she might as well do something that can strike at the king in some way. And so either that or just the daughter is her favorite, and it's come to this horrible tragic, like, you have to pick a favorite. So she saves her daughter and runs away, and it's some gruesome sound effects in the background. I think they're beheading this poor kid to take his head back as proof. And it's like, yeah, I'm expecting episode 2 to start with an image of them being hanged. Also, what was up with the dog? They brought a dog along, and then they were like, bring the dog, and then they didn't explain why. And then when they had an argument, he got angry and kicked the dog and said, get out of here, you damn dog. What was that about? Poor dog. I guess maybe it was part of the whole rat catching performance they were putting on. I don't know, man. Oh, one thing I forgot to mention. I love Otto walking in to Aemond plotting with Kristen Cole, and he's worried to see that because he's like, okay, but you know, Otto Hightower is very much a control freak. You don't know everything that's on the board. You don't know all my plans. Don't be plotting. You're a soldier. You're not a general, kind of thing. Like, leave this to me. Anyway, it's all good stuff. I'm so happy it's back, if you couldn't tell. So yeah, come back weekly for more thoughts on House of the Dragon episodes, where I'll try to go into about this much detail. I'm no Alt Shift X, but I take notes, and these are my opinions more than they are like narrative breakdowns, I guess. Anyway, thank you for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know what you thought down below if you like, and I will catch you in whatever I make next.